The autumn wind cut through the Sweetwater Valley with a mournful whisper, stirring the wispy blonde hair of the young woman kneeling before the small wooden cross. Fiona Hayes hadn't heard the approaching hoofbeats over her quiet sobs, her slender shoulders shaking as she laid a handful of wildflowers at the base of the grave marker that simply read Emily Hayes, 1869–1873. Adam Xavier reined his dun gelding to a stop, taking in the sight before him. The cemetery sat on a gentle slope overlooking the town of Redemption, Wyoming Territory, 1874. It was a modest plot of land dotted with crosses and stone markers, some weathered by years of harsh prairie winters, others like the one the woman knelt before still fresh and raw. Adam had been riding for 3 days straight, dust coating his clothes and stubble darkening his sun-bronzed face. He hadn't planned to stop in Redemption, just passing through on his way to Cheyenne, but something about the solitary figure in the graveyard had caught his attention from the trail below. He dismounted, tying his horse to the cemetery fence, and removed his worn leather hat as he approached. His spurs jangled softly with each step, finally alerting Fiona to his presence. She turned, hastily wiping tears from her reddened eyes. "Beg your pardon, madam," Adam said, his voice gentle as the breeze. "Didn't mean to intrude on your grief." Fiona looked up at the tall stranger, taking in his trail-worn appearance, the dust-covered clothes, the revolver holstered at his hip, the kind blue eyes that stood out against his weathered face. A cowboy, clearly, and not from these parts. "It's a public cemetery," she replied, her voice hoarse from crying. "You're not intruding." Adam's gaze moved to the small grave, noting the dates carved into the wooden cross, 4 years old, just a child. He'd seen his share of tragedy across the frontier, but the death of a child never failed to cut him to the quick. "Your daughter?" he asked softly, still clutching his hat in his hands. Fiona nodded, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "My little Emily. Fever took her 3 weeks ago." Her voice broke on the last word, and she covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Adam knelt down beside her, not too close, respecting her space while offering the comfort of proximity. "I'm mighty sorry for your loss, madam. There's no pain in this world like losing someone you love, especially a child." "Do you have children, mister?" she asked, trailing off as she realized she didn't know his name. "Xavier, Adam Xavier, and no, madam, I don't. Never been blessed that way." He looked at the small grave again. "Emily. That's a beautiful name." "She was a beautiful soul," Fiona whispered, "so full of life, always laughing." A sob escaped her. "I keep thinking I hear her in the house. I wake up thinking I need to check on her, and then I remember." She couldn't finish, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. Adam reached into his pocket and withdrew a clean handkerchief, offering it to her. "Here." She took it gratefully, dabbing at her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier. I'm Fiona Hayes." "Mrs. Hayes," he acknowledged with a respectful nod. "Miss," she corrected. "Emily and I, it was just the two of us." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. Unmarried mothers weren't uncommon on the frontier, though life was undoubtedly harder for them, and now she had lost her only child. "I come here every day," Fiona said, running her fingers over the freshly turned earth. "I can't bear to leave her alone." Adam looked at the woman's profile, the delicate curve of her jaw, the sorrow etched into features that he guessed had once been quick to smile. A thought formed in his mind, and before he could consider it further, the words were leaving his mouth. "Miss Hayes," he said, settling his hat over his heart. "I can't claim to know your pain exactly, but I do know what it's like to carry grief alone." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If you'd permit me, I'd like to promise you something." She turned to him, a question in her tear-filled eyes. "For as long as I'm in Redemption, you won't have to grieve alone. I'll accompany you here whenever you wish, or simply listen if you want to talk about your Emily." Fiona's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected offer from this trail-worn stranger. "That's very kind, Mr. Xavier, but I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition, Miss Hayes," he assured her. "I was planning to rest in town for a spell anyway." This wasn't strictly true. He had been intent on pushing through to Cheyenne, but something told him he was needed here, if only for a short while. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Adam looked down at the small grave and then back to Fiona. Because no one should have to carry this kind of burden alone. My ma always said that kindness costs nothing but means everything. A ghost of a smile touched Fiona's lips. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was, Adam said, a distant look crossing his features. Lost her when I was 15. Understanding passed between them, then the silent recognition of shared grief, different yet familiar. Fiona brushed the dirt from her skirts as she stood. I run the town's only bakery. If you're staying in Redemption, you're welcome to stop by. It's just off Main Street next to the general store. Adam rose as well, placing his hat back on his head. I'll do that, Miss Hayes. He glanced at the setting sun. May I walk you back to town? It'll be dark soon. She hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. As they walked down the gentle slope toward Redemption, Adam kept a respectful distance. The town below was beginning to light up as lanterns were lit in windows and along the main thoroughfare. It was a modest settlement, one main street with a handful of businesses, surrounded by scattered houses and farms. A typical frontier town built on hope and determination. Have you been in Redemption long? Adam asked, guiding his horse by the reins. 5 years, Fiona replied. I came west from Boston after my parents died. My father left me just enough to start the bakery. She paused. Emily was born our first winter here. And her father? Adam asked, then immediately regretted the question. Forgive me, that's not my business. No, it's all right, Fiona said softly. He was passing through like you, a drummer selling dry goods. He moved on before I even knew I was expecting. She looked up at Adam. But Emily was the best thing that ever happened to me. I never regretted her, not for a single moment. They reached the edge of town, where the packed dirt Main Street began. Gas lamps cast pools of yellow light at intervals, illuminating the wooden boardwalks and false-fronted buildings typical of western towns. That's my place, Fiona said, pointing to a small storefront with Hayes Bakery painted on a neat sign above the door. A modest apartment was visible above the shop. I open at sunrise if you're wanting breakfast. Adam touched the brim of his hat. I'll be there, Miss Hayes. Good night, Mr. Xavier, she said, hesitating before adding, and thank you for your kindness at the cemetery. Good night, Miss Hayes, he replied. I meant what I said. You don't have to face this alone. As Fiona climbed the exterior stairs to her apartment, Adam led his horse toward the livery stable. He hadn't planned on stopping in Redemption, but now he found himself looking for reasons to stay. The woman's grief had touched something in him, perhaps because he recognized the loneliness in her eyes, a loneliness he had carried himself for many years. Tomorrow, he decided, he would see about finding work in town. Cheyenne could wait. Morning light filtered through the curtains of Fiona's small apartment, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. She had been awake for hours already, kneading dough and stoking the bakery ovens downstairs. Work was her salvation these days, the only thing that kept her mind from constantly returning to Emily. The routine was familiar. Mix the dough, shape the loaves, slide them into the oven, repeat. But the joy was gone. Before, Emily would sit on a high stool, her little legs swinging as she watched her mother work, often with a small piece of dough to shape herself. Now the bakery was quiet save for the crackle of the fire and the occasional sound of the wooden peel scraping against the oven floor. As the town began to stir, Fiona unlocked the front door and flipped the sign to open. The fresh bread and pastries were arranged in the display case, their aroma filling the small shop. The first customers would arrive soon, ranch hands heading to work, the schoolteacher picking up something for lunch, perhaps the doctor on his morning rounds. The bell above the door jingled, and Fiona looked up, expecting to see Mrs. Patterson, who always came in first thing for a fresh loaf. Instead, Adam Xavier stood in the doorway, hat in hand, his tall frame nearly filling the entrance. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, shaved, changed his clothes, though they were still trail-worn. "Good morning, Miss Hayes," he said, a small smile lifting the corner of his mouth. "Mr. Xavier," she greeted, surprised he had actually come. "You're early." "Always been an early riser," he replied, approaching the counter. His eyes scanned the display of baked goods. Everything looks mighty fine. Thank you. What can I get you? What do you recommend? Fiona considered for a moment, then selected a large cinnamon roll. These are popular. The secret is the butter. I brown it first. Adam's eyes lit up. Sold, and a cup of coffee if you have it. Fiona nodded, wrapping the pastry in paper and pouring coffee from the pot that constantly simmered on the small stove in the corner. Will you be staying in town long? She asked, more out of politeness than genuine curiosity. I was just passing through, Adam admitted, accepting the coffee. But I'm thinking of staying a while. Asked at the livery last night if they needed help. The owner, Mr. Johnson, said he could use a hand breaking some new horses he bought. Fiona nodded. Walter Johnson is a good man. His wife brings me eggs from their chickens. Adam took a bite of the cinnamon roll and his eyebrows rose in appreciation. Miss Hayes, this might be the best thing I've eaten in months. The compliment was genuine after weeks of trail food. The sweet, buttery pastry was heavenly. A hint of color rose in Fiona's cheeks. Thank you. The bell jingled again as more customers entered, and Fiona turned her attention to them. Adam took his breakfast to a small table by the window, observing the quiet efficiency with which she worked. Despite her grief, she was unfailingly polite to each customer, though he noted that her smile never quite reached her eyes. As the morning rush subsided, Adam approached the counter again. What time do you usually visit the cemetery? He asked quietly. Fiona looked up, surprised that he remembered his promise. I close the shop at 4, then go up before supper. Adam nodded. I'll meet you here at 4 then, if that suits you. You don't have to, I know, he interrupted gently, but I'd like to if you'll allow it. Fiona studied him for a long moment, trying to discern his motives. She'd encountered men with ulterior motives before, those who saw a woman alone as an easy target, but there was something in Adam Xavier's steady gaze that spoke of sincerity. All right, she finally agreed. 4 o'clock. Adam touched 2 fingers to his brow in a casual salute. 4 o'clock it is. Thank you for breakfast, Miss Hayes. As he left the bakery, Fiona found herself watching his retreating figure through the window. There was something different about him, a quiet strength that wasn't threatening, a kindness that didn't seem calculated. For the first time since Emily's death, she felt the tiniest spark of something other than grief. Not happiness, not even close, but perhaps a momentary lifting of the overwhelming darkness. She quickly pushed the feeling aside, guilt washing over her. How could she feel anything but sorrow when her daughter lay cold in the ground? She turned back to her work, kneading the next batch of dough with renewed vigor, as if she could pound away the unwelcome emotion. Adam spent the morning at the livery stable, where Walter Johnson set him to work with 3 half-broken Mustangs recently purchased from a Shoshone trader. The work was demanding but familiar, allowing Adam's mind to wander as his body went through the practiced motions of working with the spirited animals. He couldn't stop thinking about Fiona Hayes and the sorrow etched into her features. He'd seen grief before, plenty of it in his 32 years, but there was something about her quiet dignity that touched him deeply. She wasn't looking for pity, she simply wanted to honor her daughter's memory. You handle horses well, Walter observed as Adam calmed a nervous bay gelding. Been doing this long, since I was old enough to climb on a horse, Adam replied, stroking the animal's neck. My pa ran a small ranch in Colorado, learned everything from him. Your pa still ranching? Adam shook his head. Passed on 10 years back, caught a bullet during a cattle rustling. Walter nodded solemnly. Sorry to hear it, seems like you've had your share of hardship. Adam shrugged. No more than most out here. He guided the horse into a slow walk around the corral. Known Miss Hayes long, Fiona, since she came to town 5 years back. Good woman. Makes the best bread west of the Mississippi. Walter leaned on the fence, watching Adam work. That little girl of hers was the sweetest thing. Whole town's grieving her passing. Seems like Miss Hayes is bearing it mostly alone, Adam observed. Walter sighed. Town's tried to help, but she keeps to herself. Probably doesn't help that some folks whispered about her when she first arrived, unmarried and expecting. He shook his head. Small-minded nonsense, if you ask me. She worked hard, raised that child right. Nobody's business beyond that. Adam nodded his agreement. The frontier was full of people reinventing themselves, running from pasts both troubled and tragic. Judgment came easy to some, but he'd learned long ago that everyone carried their own burdens. "You staying in town long?" Walter asked, changing the subject. "Not sure yet," Adam replied honestly, "taking it day by day." "Well, I can use the help for at least a couple weeks. The wife's been after me to get these horses trained before winter sets in. Appreciate the work," Adam said, "and a place to bunk if you've got it." "There's a room above the stable, nothing fancy, but the roof doesn't leak and there's a decent stove." "That'll do fine." As the afternoon wore on, Adam found himself watching the sun's progress across the sky, counting the hours until 4 o'clock. It had been a long time since he'd made a promise to anyone, longer still since he'd made one to a woman. The life he'd chosen, drifting from town to town, taking work where he could find it, didn't lend itself to commitments. Yet here he was, planning his day around an appointment to visit a child's grave with a woman he barely knew. At 3:30, he thanked Walter for the day's work and headed to the bathhouse behind the barber shop. If he was going to accompany Fiona to her daughter's grave, the least he could do was wash off the day's dirt and sweat. Clean and dressed in his least worn shirt, Adam arrived at the bakery just as Fiona was turning the sign on the door to closed. She looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her features when she saw him waiting. "You came," she said simply. "Said I would," he replied with a small nod. Fiona locked the door and adjusted the shawl around her shoulders. October evenings in Wyoming carried a bite, and the sun was already beginning its descent behind the mountains to the west. They walked in silence through the town, past the general store and the saloon, beyond the last houses where the path began to climb toward the cemetery on the hill. Adam kept pace beside her, neither rushing her nor falling behind, his presence solid but unobtrusive. As they reached the cemetery gate, Adam removed his hat, holding it respectfully as Fiona led the way to Emily's grave. The small wooden cross stood stark against the afternoon sky, the flowers from yesterday now wilted. Fiona knelt and removed the old flowers, replacing them with fresh wildflowers she had brought. Her fingers traced the carved letters of her daughter's name, and when she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "Hello, my sweet girl, Mama's here again." She glanced up at Adam, then back to the grave. "I've brought someone with me today. His name is Mr. Xavier." Adam knelt beside her, placing a small carved wooden horse next to the flowers. "Hello, Emily," he said gently. "I made this today. Your ma tells me you were quite a special little girl." Fiona looked at the wooden carving, then at Adam, touched by the unexpected gesture. "You made that for her?" Adam nodded. "Used to carve toys for my little sister. Thought Emily might like one." Fiona's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the tears of yesterday. There was gratitude mingled with the grief. She would have loved it. She adored horses. "I figured most little ones around here do," Adam said with a small smile. They sat in companionable silence as the sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When Fiona finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I keep thinking I should have done more. The doctor said there was nothing to be done, that the fever was too strong, but maybe if I'd recognized the signs earlier." "Don't do that to yourself," Adam said gently. "I've seen that fever take strong men in their prime." "It's not a matter of doing enough." "But I'm her mother," Fiona insisted, a catch in her voice. "I was supposed to protect her." Adam was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "My ma used to say that loving someone doesn't mean you can save them from everything. It just means they don't face it alone." He looked at her directly. "Emily didn't face it alone. She had you right there, loving her until the end." A sob escaped Fiona's throat, and she covered her face with her hands. Adam hesitated, then placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering silent support as she cried. When her tears subsided, she wiped her eyes and looked at the wooden horse again. "Would you tell me about your sister, the one you carved toys for?" Adam's expression softened at the memory. "Abigail. She was 10 years younger than me, always following me around, wanting to do everything I did." He chuckled softly. "Pa used to say she was the son he never had, the way she took to riding and roping. Where is she now? A shadow crossed Adam's face. She died when she was 16. Caught the same fever that took your Emily. Fiona's eyes widened in understanding. That's why you stopped yesterday, why you made that promise. Adam nodded, his gaze on the distant mountains. I know what it's like to lose someone you love more than life itself. And I know what it's like to feel you have to carry that grief alone. Did you carry it alone? For a long time, yes, he admitted. After we buried Abigail, I couldn't stand to be at the ranch anymore. Everything reminded me of her, so I left, been drifting ever since. How long ago was that? 12 years now. Fiona studied his profile, seeing the lingering pain in the set of his jaw. Does it ever get easier? She asked, the question that had been haunting her since Emily's death. Adam was silent for a long moment. Not easier, he finally said. Different, the grief changes shape. Some days it's a crushing weight. Other days it's just there, like an old injury that aches when the weather changes. He looked at her. But you learn to live alongside it. Fiona nodded, finding comfort in his honesty. He wasn't offering empty platitudes or telling her that time would heal all wounds. He was acknowledging the permanence of her loss while offering hope that she could survive it. As the light began to fade, Adam stood and offered his hand to help her up. We should head back before it gets dark. Fiona accepted his hand, surprised at the warmth that spread from his touch. She hadn't realized how cold her own hands had become in the autumn air. Thank you, she said as they walked back toward town. For coming with me, for the carving. No need for thanks, Adam replied. I made a promise. The simple statement hung between them as they descended the hill, the lights of redemption twinkling in the growing darkness. Adam Xavier was a man of his word, Fiona realized. In a world that had taken so much from her, there was something profoundly comforting about that certainty. The days fell into a pattern. Adam would stop by the bakery each morning for breakfast, work at the livery during the day, and meet Fiona at 4 o'clock to visit Emily's grave. Sometimes they would talk about Emily, about Adam's travels, about the day-to-day happenings in redemption. Other times they would sit in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. A week passed, then 2. Autumn deepened, the cottonwoods along the creek turning golden, the nights growing colder. Adam continued to carve small wooden toys to leave at Emily's grave, a bird, a rabbit, a little doll. Each one brought a sad smile to Fiona's face, and gradually, Adam began to see moments when the grief lifted from her eyes, if only briefly. The town noticed their daily ritual, of course. In a place as small as Redemption, little went unobserved. There were whispers, some kind and some less so, but Fiona found she didn't care as much as she might have once. Adam's steady presence had become a comfort she looked forward to, a lifeline in the sea of grief that still threatened to overwhelm her at times. On a particularly cold afternoon in late October, as they sat beside Emily's grave, Fiona broke their comfortable silence with a question. "Why did you really stop that first day?" she asked, her breath visible in the crisp air. "The truth, it wasn't just because you recognized my grief." Adam considered her question, his blue eyes thoughtful. "Partly that," he admitted, "but there was something else. Something about the way you were sitting there, all alone." He paused. "I've been alone a long time, Miss Hayes. I recognized it in you." "And now?" Fiona asked softly. "Are you still alone?" Adam's gaze met hers, and something passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. "Less so than I was," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and feelings neither was quite ready to name. Then a gust of wind swept through the cemetery, making Fiona shiver. Adam stood, offering his hand. "Come on, it's getting too cold to sit out here." Fiona took his hand, allowing him to help her up. This time, though, he didn't let go immediately. His calloused fingers remained curled around hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and Fiona found herself reluctant for the contact to end. As they walked back to town, Adam seemed lost in thought. Finally, as they approached the bakery, he spoke. "Walter asked if I'd be interested in taking over the livery." Fiona looked up, surprised. "Taking over? Is he leaving?" "He and Mrs. Johnson are thinking of moving to Oregon, where their daughter settled. Said he's getting too old to manage the place on his own, especially through another Wyoming winter." Adam kicked at a stone on the path. Asked if I'd consider buying him out or at least running it until he finds a buyer. And what did you say? Adam shrugged. Said I'd think on it, and have you thought on it? He stopped walking, turning to face her. I have been thinking about a lot of things lately. His eyes met hers, serious and searching. I've been drifting for 12 years, Miss Hayes. Never stayed anywhere longer than a few months, never wanted to. And now, Fiona asked, echoing her question from earlier, now I'm wondering if maybe it's time to stop running, if maybe there's someone worth staying for. Fiona's heart beat faster at his words, hope and fear warring within her. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to think of the future, of possibilities beyond her daily grief. Adam, she said, using his first name for the first time, I don't know if I can. I'm not asking for anything, he assured her quickly. Just telling you that I'm considering putting down roots here, if that's something you might be glad of, well. He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Fiona took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I would be glad, she said softly. Very glad. A slow smile spread across Adam's face, warming his eyes. Then I'll tell Walter I'm interested. They resumed walking, a new awareness between them. When they reached the bakery, Adam hesitated. Would you? That is, if you're not too tired. Might I call on you this evening? Maybe we could talk more about this. Fiona nodded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I'd like that. Say 7 o'clock. 7 it is, Adam agreed, touching the brim of his hat. I'll see you then, Fiona. As he walked away, Fiona stood watching him, a strange lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in months. The grief was still there, it would always be there, but for the first time since Emily's death, she felt a flicker of something else, something like hope. That evening, Adam arrived promptly at 7, wearing his cleanest shirt and carrying a small bouquet of late wildflowers. Fiona had spent the intervening hours in a state of nervous anticipation, changing her dress twice and fretting over what to serve for refreshments. These are for you, Adam said, offering the flowers as she opened the door to her apartment above the bakery. Thank you, Fiona replied, taking them with a smile. They're lovely. Please come in. The apartment was small but neat, with simple furnishings and a few personal touches, a patchwork quilt draped over the sofa, a shelf of well-worn books, a small painting of the Boston Harbor hanging on one wall. On the mantel above the small fireplace stood a daguerreotype of a laughing child with Fiona's blonde hair and bright eyes. Adam's gaze was drawn to the image immediately. Emily, he asked softly. Fiona nodded, placing the flowers in a jar of water. Taken on her 3rd birthday. The traveling photographer was in town for just 1 day. She has your smile, Adam observed. Yes, Fiona agreed, a bittersweet expression crossing her face. Everyone said so. She gestured to the sofa. Please sit down, I've made some tea and there are some cookies left from today's baking. They settled into the small sitting area, the tea tray between them. For a moment, neither spoke, the significance of this step, Adam in her home, the two of them alone together hanging in the air. So, Fiona finally said, pouring the tea, you're going to stay in Redemption. Adam nodded, accepting the cup she offered. Walter and I shook on it this afternoon. I'll take over the livery at the end of the month with an option to buy outright next year if things go well. That's wonderful, Fiona said sincerely. The town needs a good livery, and you certainly know your way around horses. It's not much, Adam admitted. Not like owning a ranch or anything fancy, but it's honest work and it could be a good living with time. It's more than most have, Fiona pointed out. A business of your own, a place in the community. Adam's eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. That's what I've been missing, I think, a place to belong. The simple honesty of his statement touched Fiona deeply. She understood that longing had felt it herself when she first arrived in Redemption, pregnant and alone. I know what you mean, she said. When I came here, I didn't know a soul. I was terrified, but also hopeful, like I could create something new for myself and my child. And you did, Adam said. From what I hear, this town couldn't imagine life without Hayes Bakery now. Fiona smiled at that. I've been lucky. People have been kind for the most part. She hesitated, then added, especially since I lost her. Adam set down his cup, his expression serious. How are you, really? These past weeks I've tried not to press, but some days are better than others, Fiona admitted. I still wake up forgetting just for a moment. That's the hardest part, remembering all over again. She took a deep breath. But it helps, having someone who understands, someone who doesn't try to tell me it will all be fine soon. It won't be, Adam said gently. Not completely, but you'll find ways to carry it. Fiona nodded, grateful for his honesty. I've been thinking about what you said about grief changing shape. I think I'm starting to understand that. Some days now I can remember her and smile, not just cry. That's good, Adam said. That's how you keep them alive in a way. By remembering the joy they brought, not just the pain of losing them. They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence filled with understanding. The fire crackled in the grate, and outside the wind whistled around the eaves of the building. It's getting colder, Fiona observed. Winter will be here before we know it. First one I'll have spent in one place in a long time, Adam replied. Usually I head south before the snow flies. Winters here can be harsh, Fiona warned, but beautiful too. Emily loved the snow. A sad smile touched her lips. Last winter, we built a snowman right outside the bakery. She insisted on giving him one of my good scarves. Adam chuckled. Sounds like something Abigail would have done. She once gave her favorite doll's dress to a stray kitten to keep it warm. They would have liked each other, I think, Fiona said softly. Emily and Abigail. I think so too. The evening continued, their conversation flowing easily from memories of their lost loved ones to stories of their own lives. Adam told Fiona about growing up on a small ranch in Colorado, about his father teaching him to ride and rope, about his mother's talent for making something out of nothing during lean times. Fiona shared tales of her childhood in Boston, her father's bookshop where she first learned to love stories, her mother's gentle guidance in the kitchen that had planted the seeds for her baking career. As the clock on the mantel chimed 10, Adam reluctantly stood. I should go. It's getting late and you have an early morning. Fiona rose as well, suddenly shy. Thank you for coming and for the flowers. Thank you for having me, Adam replied, his voice warm. I enjoyed this evening. They stood facing each other for a moment, neither quite ready for the night to end. Then, with a gentle boldness that surprised them both, Adam reached out and took Fiona's hand, raising it to his lips for a brief, chaste kiss. Good night, Fiona, he said softly. Good night, Adam, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As he descended the stairs and stepped out into the cold October night, Adam felt a lightness in his step that had been absent for years. Something was beginning between them, something tentative and fragile, but real nonetheless. For the first time in 12 years, Adam Xavier was looking forward to tomorrow and the day after that and all the days that might follow in redemption. November arrived with the first snow, a gentle dusting that transformed redemption overnight. Adam continued his daily routine: breakfast at the bakery, work at the livery, accompanying Fiona to Emily's grave in the afternoon. But there were changes too. Some evenings he would call on Fiona at her apartment, bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, fresh honey from a farmer outside town, once even a kitten he'd rescued from a storm drain. She needs a home, he explained as the tiny calico batted at Fiona's fingers. Thought you might like the company. Fiona had cradled the kitten to her chest, tears welling in her eyes. Emily always wanted a cat, she whispered. I kept saying maybe when she was older. Adam immediately looked stricken. I'm sorry. I didn't think, no, Fiona interrupted, smiling through her tears. It's perfect, she would have loved her. She stroked the kitten's soft fur. I'll call her Emmy. The town noticed the developing relationship between the grieving baker and the new livery owner. Most approved Fiona had been alone too long, they said, and Adam Xavier seemed a decent sort, if a bit taciturn. A few tongues wagged about the propriety of it all, coming so soon after the child's death, but those voices were quickly silenced by the more compassionate members of the community. Grief and love aren't mutually exclusive, Walter Johnson's wife Martha declared firmly at a gathering of the Ladies' Aid Society. That poor girl deserves some happiness after all she's been through. As November deepened, so did the connection between Adam and Fiona. Their conversations grew more personal, their time together more comfortable. Adam began to share details of his life during the 12 years he'd spent drifting, the places he'd seen, the jobs he'd worked, the people he'd met. Fiona spoke more freely about Emily, sharing both the joys and challenges of raising her daughter alone. One snowy evening, as they sat before the fire in Fiona's apartment, Adam broached a subject he'd been considering for some time. "Fiona," he began, his voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking about the bakery." She looked up from her mending, curious. "What about it? It seems to be doing well, but I've noticed you're always rushed in the mornings. Have you ever thought of hiring help?" Fiona sighed, setting aside her sewing. "Many times, but I can't afford it yet." "Maybe in another year or two." Adam hesitated, then continued. "What if the help didn't need much pay, just room and board to start?" Fiona frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean?" "There's a woman who came through town yesterday, traveling with her son. Her husband died in a mining accident in Montana, and they're heading to her sister's place in Colorado. But their wagon broke an axle just outside town, and repairs will take time they don't have money for." Adam leaned forward, warming to his subject. "She mentioned she used to work in a bakery back east. Her boy's about 14, strong and willing to work. They need a place to stay for the winter at least." "And you think I should hire her?" Fiona asked, surprised by the suggestion. Adam shrugged. "Just a thought. She seems like a decent woman, down on her luck. The boy, too, might be good for you to have help, especially with business picking up as it has." Fiona considered the idea. The bakery had indeed been busier lately, partly due to the approaching holidays and partly, she suspected, because Adam had been talking it up around town. Having help would allow her to expand her offerings, maybe even take special orders for Christmas. "Where are they staying now?" she asked. "At the boarding house, but their money won't last long," Adam replied. "I covered their first week, but after that." Fiona's eyes softened. "You paid for their lodging." Adam looked slightly embarrassed. "Seemed the right thing to do. The boy reminds me a bit of myself at that age, trying to be the man of the family too soon." In that moment, Fiona realized just how deeply she had come to care for this man. His quiet generosity, his understanding of others' struggles, his willingness to help without making a show of it, these were qualities that touched her heart in ways she hadn't expected to feel again. "Bring them by the bakery tomorrow," she decided. "I'll talk to them, see if it might work out." Adam smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Thank you. I think it could be good for everyone involved." The next day, Adam introduced Fiona to Sarah Miller and her son James. Sarah was a slender woman in her mid-30s with careworn features but kind eyes. James was tall for his age, with a serious demeanor that occasionally broke into a boyish grin when he thought no one was looking. "Mrs. Miller has experience with bread making and pastries," Adam explained as they sat in the bakery after closing time. "And James here is strong enough to handle the flour sacks and firewood." "I'm a hard worker, madam," Sarah assured Fiona, "and we wouldn't be a burden, just a place to stay and maybe a small wage when you can manage it." "The apartment upstairs is small," Fiona said thoughtfully. "But there's a storage room in the back that could be converted to a bedroom. It would be tight, but we've been in tighter spots," Sarah said with a determined smile. "Haven't we, James?" The boy nodded, his eyes taking in the bakery with interest. "I can help with deliveries too," he offered. "And I'm good with math if you need help with the accounts." Fiona made her decision. "Let's try it then, for the winter at least. If it works out for all of us, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement in the spring." The relief on Sarah's face was palpable. "Thank you, Miss Hayes. You won't regret it." After Sarah and James left to collect their belongings from the boarding house, Fiona turned to Adam with a questioning look. "You engineered this, didn't you?" Adam raised his eyebrows innocently. "Engineered? I just introduced you to someone who needed work and you needed help. Simple as that." Fiona said skeptically, but she was smiling. "You're a meddler, Adam Xavier," he grinned, not denying it. "Maybe so, but a well-intentioned one." "Yes," she agreed softly. "Very well-intentioned indeed." The addition of Sarah and James to the bakery proved to be exactly what Fiona needed, though she hadn't realized it until they arrived. Sarah's experience complemented Fiona's skills perfectly. Where Fiona excelled at breads and simple pastries, Sarah had a talent for more elaborate cakes and pies. James, despite his youth, was indeed strong and capable, managing the heavy lifting and deliveries with enthusiasm. But more than the practical help, Fiona found herself appreciating the simple human companionship. The bakery, which had felt so empty since Emily's death, was filled with life again. Sarah's quiet humming as she worked, James's eager questions, the sounds of people moving about the space that had once been filled with her daughter's laughter. It wasn't the same. Nothing could ever replace Emily, but it was a different kind of healing, one that Fiona hadn't known she needed. With Sarah handling the early morning baking, Fiona found herself with more time to spend with Adam. Their daily visits to Emily's grave continued, but they also began to explore other aspects of life together. They rode out to the mountains one clear December day, Adam teaching Fiona to shoot his rifle just in case. They attended the town's Christmas pageant, sitting side by side in the small church, their shoulders touching. On Christmas Eve, they joined Walter and Martha Johnson for dinner, along with Sarah and James, forming an impromptu family gathering that left everyone with full hearts as well as full stomachs. Through it all, Adam remained patient and understanding, never pushing Fiona beyond what she was ready for, always respectful of her ongoing grief. But as the winter deepened and the new year approached, both began to acknowledge, if only to themselves, that their feelings had grown into something neither had expected to find again. On New Year's Eve, the town of Redemption held its annual dance in the schoolhouse. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the room as the local musicians tuned their instruments. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a punch bowl sat prominently in the center, carefully watched by the minister's wife to ensure no one added anything stronger than the prescribed recipe. Fiona had hesitated about attending, but Sarah had insisted, even offering to lend her a dress for the occasion. "You can't hide away forever," she'd said gently. "Emily wouldn't want that for you." So Fiona found herself standing at the edge of the room, watching as couples twirled to a lively reel. She wore a borrowed dark blue dress that Sarah had quickly altered to fit her smaller frame, her hair pinned up in a simple but elegant style. "You look beautiful," a voice said behind her, and she turned to find Adam dressed in his best clothes, his hat in his hands. "Thank you," she replied, a blush coloring her cheeks. "You look quite handsome yourself," and he did. He'd had a proper haircut, and his freshly shaved jaw revealed a strong, clean line. His shirt was crisp and white against his tan skin, and his eyes seemed bluer than ever in the lantern light. "Would you care to dance?" he asked, offering his hand. Fiona hesitated. "I haven't danced since." "Well, in a very long time." "Neither have I," Adam admitted. "Might be a bit rusty, but I promise not to step on your toes too badly." With a small smile, Fiona placed her hand in his. "I'll hold you to that promise." He led her onto the dance floor just as the musicians struck up a waltz. Adam's hand settled at her waist, respectful but firm, as he guided her into the steps of the dance. He moved with a natural grace that belied his claims of being rusty, and Fiona found herself relaxing into the rhythm, allowing him to lead her around the floor. "You're not half bad at this, Mr. Xavier," she teased as they completed a turn. "Had a good teacher," he replied with a smile. "My ma insisted all her children learn to dance properly, said it was as important as knowing how to ride a horse." "Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was," Adam agreed. "She would have liked you." The simple statement, offered so casually, touched Fiona deeply. To be accepted, even hypothetically, by this man's family meant more than she could express. As the waltz ended, Adam didn't immediately release her. Instead, he looked down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Fiona," he said, his voice low, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you." Before he could continue, the town mayor called for everyone's attention, announcing that midnight was approaching and it was time to welcome in 1875. 10, the crowd began to count. 9, 8, Adam's eyes remained fixed on Fiona's, a question in their blue depths. 7, 6, 5. Fiona's heart raced, understanding perfectly what he was asking without words. 4, 3, 2, she gave a small nod, permission granted. 1, Happy New Year. As cheers erupted around them, Adam leaned down and kissed her gently, his lips warm against hers. It was brief, chaste enough for public view, but filled with promise and tenderness that made Fiona's heart swell. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of regret or discomfort. Finding none, a slow smile spread across his face. "Happy New Year, Fiona," he said softly. "Happy New Year, Adam," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Around them, the celebration continued, but they remained in their own world for a moment longer, something new and precious growing between them as the old year gave way to the new. Later that night, as Adam walked Fiona home through the snow-covered streets, they moved closer together, their gloved hands tentatively finding each other. The town was quiet, most residents still at the dance or already tucked into their homes for the night. "What were you going to tell me?" Fiona asked as they approached the bakery, before the countdown interrupted. Adam slowed his pace, considering his words carefully. "I wanted to tell you that these past months have meant more to me than I can say, that meeting you, even in such sad circumstances, has changed something in me." He stopped walking, turning to face her under the light of a street lamp. "I care for you, Fiona, deeply, more than I've cared for anyone in a very long time." Fiona's breath formed small clouds in the cold air as she absorbed his words. "I care for you too, Adam. It's frightening in a way. I didn't expect to feel this again. Sometimes I feel guilty, being happy when Emily isn't here to see it." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I felt that way after Abigail died, like I didn't deserve joy if she couldn't have it too." He reached up, gently brushing a snowflake from Fiona's cheek. "But I've come to believe that they wouldn't want that for us. That perhaps the best way to honor them is to live fully, to embrace happiness when it comes our way." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes, but they weren't tears of grief. "I think you're right. Emily was always so full of joy, so quick to laugh. She would want that for me, for us." Adam's hand lingered on her cheek, warm despite the cold night. "I don't want to rush you, Fiona. I know your heart is still healing. But I want you to know that I'm here for as long as you'll have me." In response, Fiona rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, a kiss of her own initiation, tender but sure. When she pulled away, Adam's eyes were wide with surprise and pleasure. "I'd like that very much," she whispered. "For you to be here, for us to see where this leads." His smile was radiant in the lamplight. "Then that's what we'll do, one day at a time." He kissed her once more, a gentle promise sealed in the quiet of the new year's first hours before bidding her good night at her door. As Fiona climbed the stairs to her apartment, her heart felt lighter than it had in months. The grief was still there, it would always be there, but now it shared space with something else, something warm and hopeful and new. For the first time since losing Emily, Fiona found herself looking forward to tomorrow, and all the tomorrows that might follow with Adam by her side. The winter months passed in a blur of cold days and warm evenings. Adam and Fiona's relationship deepened naturally, neither rushing nor holding back. They continued their daily visits to Emily's grave, but the routine took on a different quality, less a ritual of grief and more a shared honoring of a precious life. With Sarah and James helping at the bakery, Fiona found time to assist Adam at the livery occasionally. She had little experience with horses, but she was a quick learner, and Adam was a patient teacher. The townspeople grew accustomed to seeing them together at church on Sundays, sharing meals at the hotel restaurant, walking arm in arm through town. By March, the snows were beginning to melt, revealing patches of muddy ground and the first hints of green. The promise of spring hung in the air, a tangible reminder of renewal and second chances. On a mild afternoon, Adam and Fiona rode out to a small hill overlooking the town. The snow had receded enough to reveal a patch of dry ground beneath a large pine tree, and Adam spread a blanket for them to sit on. "It's beautiful up here," Fiona said, looking out over the valley. Redemption lay below them, smoke rising from chimneys, the church steeple standing tall among the modest buildings. Beyond the town, the mountains rose majestically, their peaks still capped with snow. "Found this spot when I first arrived," Adam said, settling beside her. "Used to come up here to think." "What did you think about?" Fiona asked, leaning slightly against his shoulder. At first, whether to stay or move on, he glanced at her with a smile. "Lately, I've been thinking about the future." Something in his tone made Fiona's heart beat faster. "Oh. And what do you see in this future of yours?" Adam took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I see the livery growing, maybe adding a blacksmith shop. I see the bakery thriving, with Sarah and James becoming partners in time." He paused, his blue eyes serious as they met hers. "And I see us, Fiona, together." Fiona's breath caught. Together how, in answer, Adam reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. When he opened his hand, a simple gold ring lay on his palm, catching the afternoon sunlight. "This was my mother's," he said softly. "I've carried it with me all these years, never thinking I'd have cause to use it." His eyes searched hers, vulnerable and hopeful. "Fiona Hayes, I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day in the cemetery when you spoke of Emily with such love and grief. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Fiona's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Oh, Adam, yes, yes, I will." His face broke into a smile of such pure happiness that it made her heart ache in the best possible way. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose, but they both knew it could be adjusted, and then he kissed her, a kiss full of promise and future and love. When they finally broke apart, Fiona rested her forehead against his. "I love you, Adam Xavier. I never thought I'd say those words to anyone again, but I do. I love you." They sat together on the hillside until the sun began to set, making plans and sharing dreams. They would live in the apartment above the bakery for now, but perhaps in time they would build a small house on the edge of town. The livery was doing well, and with Walter Johnson's guidance, Adam was learning the business side of things quickly. The bakery, too, was thriving, especially with Sarah's contributions. "You think Sarah and James will stay?" Adam asked as they gathered their things to head back to town. "I hope so," Fiona replied. "I've grown fond of them both. And James is becoming quite the young man. He reminds me a bit of you, actually." Adam chuckled. "Poor kid, let's hope he makes better choices than I did." "I don't know," Fiona said, smiling up at him. "Some of your choices turned out pretty well, I'd say." He helped her onto her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. "Best choice I ever made was stopping at that cemetery last October." As they rode back to town in the gathering dusk, Fiona felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path that had led her here had been marked by both joy and terrible sorrow, but she wouldn't change it. Every step, even the painful ones, had brought her to this moment, to this man, to this future that suddenly stretched before her, bright with possibility. News of their engagement spread quickly through Redemption. Most of the town expressed delight and offered congratulations. A few raised eyebrows at the speed of the courtship, especially given Fiona's relatively recent loss, but those concerns were largely kept private. Martha Johnson insisted on hosting an engagement dinner at her home, inviting not only the couple but also Sarah and James, the minister and his wife, and the town doctor and his family. It was a warm, lively evening filled with good food, laughter, and stories. "When's the wedding to be?" Martha asked as they enjoyed coffee and pie after dinner. Adam and Fiona exchanged glances. "We were thinking June," Fiona replied, "when the wildflowers are in bloom." "A fine choice," the minister, Reverend Thomas, approved. "The church garden should be at its best then." "Actually," Adam said, a bit hesitantly, "we were thinking of a different location." He looked at Fiona, who nodded encouragingly. "We'd like to be married on the hill overlooking town. It's become a special place for us." Understanding dawned in Martha's eyes. "Near the cemetery," she said softly. "So Emily can be part of it." Fiona nodded, grateful for the woman's perception. "Yes, it feels right somehow to include her in this new beginning." "I think it's a lovely idea," the minister's wife said, reaching over to squeeze Fiona's hand. A reminder that love doesn't end with loss but grows in new directions. As April gave way to May, wedding preparations began in earnest. Fiona ordered fabric for a new dress, not white, which felt wrong for a widow, but a soft blue that Adam said matched her eyes. Sarah, who had a talent for sewing as well as baking, offered to make it. The bakery remained busy, especially as word of Sarah's cake-making skills spread throughout the county. James, now 15, had taken over most of the deliveries and was learning to keep the accounts with a natural aptitude for numbers that impressed everyone. Adam continued to expand the livery business, hiring a local man with blacksmithing experience to add that service. He also began building furniture for their future home in his spare time: a dining table, chairs, a rocking chair for Fiona that he presented to her on her birthday in early May. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, running her hands over the smooth wood. "Where did you learn to make something like this?" "My pa taught me the basics," Adam replied, pleased by her reaction, "and I picked up more along the way. Used to trade carpentry work for meals and lodging when money was tight." Fiona sat in the chair, testing its gentle rock. "I love it, thank you." Adam knelt beside her, taking her hand. "There's something else I want to talk to you about, something important." Fiona's brow furrowed at his serious tone. "What is it?" Adam took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about names for our future children if we're blessed that way." Fiona's expression softened. They had discussed children before, both agreeing they wanted a family together, but this was the first time specific plans had been mentioned. "I wondered," Adam continued, his voice gentle, "how you would feel about naming our first daughter Emily, to honor her memory." Tears filled Fiona's eyes. "Oh, Adam, that's beautiful, but are you sure? Don't you want to honor Abigail too?" Adam smiled, his eyes warm with love. "I thought maybe our second daughter could be Abigail, or our first if you'd prefer. But I wanted you to know that I understand Emily will always be part of our family." Fiona leaned forward and kissed him, her heart full. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding, for everything." As they broke apart, a small meow announced Emmy the kitten's presence. She had grown into a sleek young cat with a habit of demanding attention at inopportune moments. Adam chuckled as she wound herself around his legs. "And of course, we already have this little lady to keep us on our toes." Fiona scooped up the cat, scratching under her chin. "Our first family member, and hopefully not the last." The days leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. The entire town seemed involved in the preparations. The hotel owner insisted on providing the wedding feast. The schoolchildren picked wildflowers for decorations. And Walter Johnson surprised the couple with the gift of a small plot of land on the edge of town for their future home. "It's too much," Fiona protested when he presented them with the deed. "Nonsense," Walter replied gruffly. "Martha and I have no use for it, and you two will need a place of your own, especially when the little ones start coming along." He winked at Adam. "Consider it payment for taking that ornery livery off my hands." The night before the wedding, Adam and Fiona walked up to the cemetery together. It had become their tradition to visit Emily's grave every Sunday and on special occasions. Tonight, they placed fresh flowers on the small grave and sat together on the grass beside it. "Tomorrow's a big day," Adam said, his arm around Fiona's shoulders. "Yes," she agreed, leaning into him. "I never thought I'd be here again, preparing to marry. After Emily died, I couldn't imagine ever feeling happiness again." "And now?" Adam asked gently. Fiona looked up at him, her eyes clear and certain. "Now I know that grief and joy can exist side by side. That loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for Emily, and honoring her memory doesn't mean I can't embrace a future with you." Adam kissed her forehead, his heart full. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Fiona Hayes. And tomorrow, I'll be the proudest man in Wyoming when you become Fiona Xavier." They sat in companionable silence as the sun set, casting long shadows across the cemetery. When the first stars appeared, they made their way back down to town, where tradition dictated they would spend their last night apart before the wedding. At the door to the bakery, Adam kissed Fiona tenderly. "Until tomorrow, my love." "Until tomorrow," she echoed, her eyes shining with anticipation. June 12, 1875, dawned clear and perfect. Wildflowers covered the hillside where chairs had been arranged in a semicircle, facing an arch woven with greenery and blossoms. The town of Redemption spread out below, and the mountains rose majestically in the distance. Adam stood beneath the arch with Reverend Thomas, Walter Johnson, beside him as his best man. He wore a new suit ordered from Cheyenne, his boots polished to a shine, his hair neatly trimmed. His hands were still calloused from work, but scrubbed clean for the occasion. As the small group of musicians began to play, the assembled guests, nearly the entire town, turned to watch Sarah and James walk up the path first, followed by Martha Johnson, who had agreed to be Fiona's matron of honor. And then Fiona appeared, and Adam's breath caught in his throat. Her dress was the color of a summer sky, simple but elegant, with tiny wildflowers embroidered along the hem and sleeves, Sarah's handiwork. Her blonde hair was pinned up with a few loose curls framing her face, and she carried a bouquet of the same wildflowers that dotted the hillside. But it was her smile that truly captivated him, radiant, genuine, full of love and hope and future. As she walked toward him, Adam felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't known in 12 long years of wandering. When Fiona reached his side, Adam took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, with Reverend Thomas speaking of love's endurance through both joy and sorrow. Adam and Fiona had written their own vows, promises made not just to each other, but to the family. They would build together a family that would always include the memory of a little girl named Emily and a young woman named Abigail. "With this ring," Adam said, sliding a gold band onto Fiona's finger to join her engagement ring, "I pledge my love, my life, and my future to you, Fiona Hayes. I promise to walk beside you through whatever comes, to share your joys and sorrows, to build a home and a family with you, and to love you until my last breath." Fiona's voice was clear and steady as she placed a matching band on Adam's finger. "With this ring, I pledge my heart, my trust, and my dreams to you, Adam Xavier. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face each day by your side, to create a home filled with love and laughter, and to cherish you all the days of my life." "By the authority vested in me," Reverend Thomas proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Adam, you may kiss your bride." As their lips met in their first kiss as a married couple, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Adam and Fiona turned to face their friends and neighbors, hands clasped tightly together, their faces alight with happiness. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food and music, and dancing on the hillside under a canopy of stars. Adam and Fiona moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but always returning to each other's side, as if drawn by an invisible thread. As the night deepened and the party began to wind down, Adam took Fiona's hand and led her away from the gathering, toward the small grove of trees near the cemetery. "I have something to show you," he said, guiding her through the trees to a small clearing. There, bathed in moonlight, stood a wooden bench, beautifully crafted with intricate carvings along the back and sides. Adam had placed it facing Emily's grave, but also positioned so that it overlooked the town and the mountains beyond. "I thought we might want a place to sit when we visit," he explained softly. "Somewhere we can come together, to remember and to look forward." Fiona ran her fingers over the carvings, wildflowers and horses and stars, all the things that had become significant in their life together. "It's perfect," she whispered, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. "When did you find time to make this?" "Been working on it for weeks," Adam admitted. "Walter let me use a corner of the livery after hours." They sat together on the bench, Fiona leaning her head on Adam's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her. "Are you happy, Mrs. Xavier?" he asked, his voice low and tender. "Completely," she answered without hesitation. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "And this is just the beginning." As they sat in the moonlight, looking out over the town that had become their home, Both felt the presence of those they had lost not as a shadow of grief, but as a gentle reminder of the love that had shaped them into the people they were today. The promise Adam had made that autumn day that Fiona would never grieve alone had been kept, but it had evolved into something far deeper, a promise of shared joy, shared memories, shared dreams. A promise of love that acknowledged the past while embracing the future, step by step, day by day, for all the years to come. And in the quiet of that perfect June night, as the stars wheeled overhead and the town of redemption slept peacefully below, Adam and Fiona Xavier began their life together, a life built on understanding, compassion, and a love born from the ashes of grief, yet blooming as vibrant and beautiful as the wildflowers that covered the Wyoming hills.